talk about survival horror, it's one of my very favorite genres to play out of the many different video games that I've grown to cherish, and for good reason. They just tend to hit a lot of the things that I typically like in my video games. You know, that limited gameplay that not only challenges the player but forces them to adapt, abstract storytelling that wants you to draw your own conclusions, and best of all, these games stick with you. A well-designed horror will linger in my mind far longer than any other kind of game. But some of them do stick in my mind for the wrong reasons too. I've played my share of horror games that are memorable because they seem promising, but just missed the mark somewhere as well. In fact, that's what the game I want to talk about today, Kwaidan, is all about. Storytime. A few weeks ago, we had a pretty bad power outage over where I lived, and it ended up killing my computer's old power supply. Don't feel sorry for me, it was time for me to upgrade my hardware anyways. But because I'm poor and didn't immediately have the money to spare on buying a new power supply, I decided to play on my Nintendo Switch to entertain myself. I don't use my Switch very much, but when I do, I always find myself looking through the eShop for little gems. And I think I hit the jackpot when I found Kwaidan for just over $1. This game is a survival horror / point and click hybrid that was made mostly by one person, Gudo Taguchi of Gudoan, a veteran graphic designer who decided to go freelance so he could work on his own games. And in 2018, after 9 years of development, he released this as his first full-fledged video game. Now listen, Kwaidan hooked me in ways that survival horrors rarely do anymore. And I'm not saying that because I think this is a particularly great game or anything, or because I decided to play this in Dragon's Dogma for about 3 weeks straight, but because I think this game genuinely has unrecognized potential. I found it fun analyzing this game and learning its ins and outs to the point where the first thing I did after fixing my computer was getting it on PC as well. And that's the version I'm gonna be talking about in this video, but I will draw comparisons to the Switch version because they actually differ in a few considerable ways. So first off, this game is a period piece set in 1930s early Showa era Japan. We control the 19-year-old Hososhi in training, Haruka Yamoto. A Hososhi is basically an exorcist who wards off yokai through physical means. In this case, we use multiple weapons to fight them. So Haruka is training in a forest with her master Shiro one night when a man suddenly stumbles across them and begs them for their help. It turns out he works as a servant at a nearby manor that's been overrun by yokai, and they started attacking everyone inside. And just as Haruka and Shiro agree to help, a larger snake-like yokai named Shokuin appears and gets into a fight with them. And Shiro does hold the yokai off, but not before it turns him into a cute little frog and retreats. From then on, Haruka dons the mask her master was wearing, and they head into a manor to rescue everyone inside. Pretty simple intro. So before I talk about the gameplay, I gotta talk about the first thing that caught my eye with this game. The way this game looks. This isn't harping on anyone in particular, but you'll notice that with a lot of these indie horrors that are inspired by traditional survival horror games, they have these low-poly PlayStation-esque graphics as well. And that's fine, I love that look, and I know it takes more work than it seems to pull it off well, but I really appreciate a throwback that's more reminiscent of the PlayStation 2 era. These aren't a rarity, but they are less common, so it's always refreshing to see them pop up. With this game taking place in Japan as well, it reminded me of classics like Fatal Frame, Kuon, Siren, and even though it's not a horror game, or at least I don't think it is, Onimusha to some extent. I do think the aesthetic could have gone a bit further in a few places though. This game kinda has a vintage film motif with these film borders being all over the branding and even in the game itself, but it just doesn't do much else with that idea, which is a shame. Not saying it has to go full Beautiful Joe, but you know, just overlaying some film grain or showing a leader each time you started the game would have been enough. The theme just feels kind of half-baked to me. And this is a really minor nitpick, but the alternative cel-shaded graphics you can play this game with and the text at the bottom of the screen does clash with that vintage look that this game is going for. But like I said, I still enjoyed looking at this game, watching it too. All of the animations and cutscenes are animated well, and this game has a pretty engaging story. It's short and pretty predictable, but it still managed to give all of its characters and world plenty of depth, more than I expected. With the way the story ended too, I could definitely see this game getting a sequel in the future. I'm getting ahead of myself though. The gameplay. Okay, so this is where things start to go a bit downhill for me. This game pointlessly complicates things. It offers you two ways to play it actually. There's Origin mode, which has traditional tank controls and the PlayStation 2 era graphics I mentioned earlier. If you're playing this game with a keyboard, you only have the option of playing in Origin mode, so you'll have to connect a controller if you want to play the alternative, Modern mode. This one has 3D controls and the cel-shaded look. I don't think there's an objective best way to play this game, but that's because I don't think this game was designed with any one mode in mind. Initially, you might think tank controls are the way to go because it helps to sell that retro atmosphere that this game is going for.
This game also uses fixed camera angles, which having tank controls is beneficial for because the direction you move in is relative to the player, not the camera.
But this game also has plenty of boss fights and open areas where having that maneuverability that analog controls give you can be helpful. It's not like it grants you the power to skirt and dance around your enemies, but it can be the difference between you finishing a playthrough with damage or not. The modern mode also has its own annoying problems in the button mapping. See, in this game you're able to guard, which is handy because it negates most damage. In Origin mode, which uses the D-pad, you just have to press down to move away from enemies and you'll guard. But for some reason this is maintained in modern mode, which uses the analog stick. Listen, I get you can't just hold down on the stick to guard like you can with the D-pad because that would just make you move down the screen. But why is down on the D-pad still the designated guard button? You can't use the rest of the D-pad in modern mode, and if we're not using the D-pad at all, that's one of the most impractical places a guard button could be. It feels unnatural. Funny enough, this issue doesn't actually exist in the Switch version of the game. See, this game was actually ported to the console by a separate company called Deiko. And with this port, they made a few improvements to the game, one of them being binding guard to the left trigger. This is a really cool change that makes sense because your fingers naturally rest on the back of the controller. That doesn't change the fact that the version I'm playing doesn't have this luxury though. Some of you might be thinking that the solution would be to go into the settings to change your controls, but you can't do that because this game doesn't have any settings. In fact, it doesn't even have a proper pause menu. It is possible to stop the gameplay, as clicking on anything will freeze time, but that only stops the gameplay. There's no screen that grants you access to change the resolution or control the audio, or even allows you to exit when you're not on the title menu, which you can only return to when you die. If you want to leave the game without dying, you gotta save and all that for. There were other little things I had issues with too, like the fact you can only cycle through your weapons in one order, which means if you need something in that instant, you have to be careful or you can be screwed. But those weren't so bad. The point I'm really trying to get at though is these controls can be a hump you have to get over before you can really enjoy this game, and if you can't get acquainted with them, they probably will kill your experience. However, if you can get acclimated to everything, you'll find that everything here still works as it should. The controls are responsive, you move and attack properly, you run, you guard, you click on objects, and everything's fine. If you've ever played a traditional survival horror before, then you'll be familiar with how this game plays as well. There's tons of locked doors, limited resources, and a decent amount of backtracking, but what makes Kwaidan stand apart is the pointing and clicking. You're gonna be doing a lot of that in this game, as that's the only way to interact with this world besides the combat. And I'll be honest, at first I did find this feature pretty gimmicky. It's not like pointing and clicking does anything a designated interact button couldn't do besides provide some observational flavor text about objects that are far, far away in the distance. But then I discovered you have to use the cursor to interact with objects in first person, and that justified its inclusion in the game for me. Even then though, I can't say this game gets as much mileage out of it as it could. There are secret things you'll need to grab or observe in this manner that you just won't be able to see without going into first person, but there aren't a lot. This also leads right into one of my other issues. You don't unlock the first person cam until you're halfway through this game, and I gotta ask, why? You might think it's to prevent sequence breaking, as the player might be able to find something that they're not supposed to early, but I know that's not the case because there's nothing for the player to grab in first person until they enter the room where they unlock this mechanic. I actually believe the only reason why this camera angle was locked was just to prevent you from noticing things too early, and the reason why I think that is because I experienced something pretty annoying in my first playthrough. In the first floor of the manor, there was something on the wall I wanted to inspect, but Haruka said it was too far for her to get a good look at, and if I tried to walk closer, the camera angle would change to where the object was, preventing me from even being able to click on it. So I thought, okay, this is obviously something important, I'll return to it later. Maybe once I get to that second floor up there, I'll be able to see it better. But when I got to the second floor, I couldn't get a good look down at the wall at all, so I said screw this and continued playing the game as normal. That's not the bad part though. When I unlocked the first person point of view, I knew immediately that I was supposed to use it to look at that thing on the wall. And do you want to know what it was? A kanji math puzzle you need to solve by finding these hidden placards that had kanji and numbers written on them. The answer would give you the code to unlock a safe. But again, I ask, why? Why not let the player see this chart and find these placards earlier in the game? Again, you can't sequence break the game because the safe is in the same room you unlock the first person view in, so why lock it? It's not like any other game where you need to progress in the story to find a MacGuffin that unlocks a cool new weapon or mechanic either, it's just using your eyes. Because you can't find any of these placards until you unlock this mechanic either, this also means tons of backtracking as they're scattered all over the manor. It's not a very large manor to be fair, but it's still pretty annoying having to retread your steps and scan every room just to find these things. But with all of that said, you don't need to find every placard, and I did enjoy memorizing the kanji and solving this puzzle. I had a pencil and this envelope next to me, so it was pretty fun to jot everything down. The other puzzles in this game were fun too. They were pretty easy and there weren't too many of them, but they were all enjoyable. I found the rest of the gameplay pretty enjoyable as well, mostly the combat. As I've already mentioned, Haruka has access to multiple weapons. Your most basic weapon is the Naginata, a polearm she swipes at chest level which can hit just about most yokai, but not all of them. For the shorter yokai, the Magatama comes in handy. She throws this on the ground and it does AoE damage. You can also use this to defeat the normal walking yokai as well, but there's a bit of wind up to it, so it's not as reliable. And finally, there's the mirror, which you use for yokai that are above you. This one definitely gets the least play as you don't deal with a lot of enemies that fly or hang above you, but it does have some unique use outside of combat as well, so that's pretty cool. If you'll notice, you have a mystic green bar under the health bar as well, and that's your aura, and you need some of that to use the Magatama or mirror. The way you replenish it is by guarding or attacking, and the way you replenish health is by finding and using this herbal medicine, or eating food that's scattered around the manor. This game is pretty generous with giving you these healing items, but it's even more generous with giving you these wooden memos that are basically your ink ribbons. I mean, just look at this. In the attic of the manor, you can find 2 hidden in these chests, and once you climb your way outside, you'll see 1, 2, 3 more. Here's something cool about the wooden memos though. You can also use these to upgrade your weapons when you come across these shrines dedicated to each one. Just use your wooden memo in front of it, and you'll be just a bit stronger. The Naginata gets an extra attack, the Magatama gets an increased radius, and the mirror just activates faster, I guess. I will say, I found this game lost a lot of its challenge because this game is so liberal with handing you both of these items. On my first playthrough, I was super rational with my inventory because I didn't know where all the save points were, or when I would come across some more items, right? But once I realized just how many items this game gives you for as small of a map as this manor is, I started to play a lot less conservatively. After you beat the game once, the challenge changes to beating it without taking damage or saving. But good luck. I failed so many runs attempting this challenge. I'm gonna attribute some of my failures to this game being unfair as well. I failed more than one attempt due to yokai attacking me while I should have had iframes, or yokai attacking me as soon as I walked into a room. It's still a good and totally doable challenge, and if you buy this game and want to try it, then you should absolutely go for it. You should use my forfeiture to prove you're a better Kwaidan player than me in fact. I'm just saying, I felt accomplished enough just having finished this game. I did learn a lot while attempting this challenge though, and I don't want my knowledge to go unknown, so here are some tips for you prospective Kwaidan enjoyers. If you aren't looking at certain enemies, they won't attack you. This applies to all yokai except the ones that chase you. This is more situational, but you can also despawn enemies. Just walk back a bit and they disappear as quickly as they spawn. If you can do this, do this. You can also buffer inputs while Haruka is mid-animation. Use this to guard when you're fighting these annoying yokai who don't flinch when you attack them. These were some of my biggest run killers. And most importantly, play modern. Spare yourself the trouble. Anyways, that is Kwaidan. Do I recommend this game? Well, only to those of you who really like these old survival horror games. I don't think you'll have too much fun here if that's not your cup of tea. Also, the asking price of $25 feels just a bit too steep for how much game is actually here. I wasn't too disappointed with my purchases, but I'd wait for it to go on sale for at least $15. I mean, I got it for $1 and that feels like a steal, so it's definitely worth more, but $25? I'm not sure. What I'd really love to see is another game under the Kwaidan title that's just a bit more polished. You know, add a proper pause screen, incorporate the pointing and clicking into the game some more, stuff like that. This game can be annoying to play at times, but as someone who really does love survival horror and this game's theming with you basically being an exorcist, I can see past the faults, but you know, they're still right there in front of my eyes. For all of its faults though, it's still impressive that this game was made by one guy, and I'm definitely gonna keep an eye on whatever Gudo's working on next. I actually see he's been working on a new game that's due to be released soon called Incline. It's not a survival horror, but it seems to play with the same idea that Kwaidan does, so if you're interested in this game, maybe you'll want to check that one out too. Also, point and click horror is cool. Please make more of these.